The day I watched Deborah Henderson wave a cease and desist letter at me through my truck window, I knew my peaceful life in Cedar Ridge, Montana was about to get complicated. I had been plowing snow for 18 years in this mountain community, and nobody had ever complained before. My name is Marcus Sullivan, and I run Sullivan Snow Services, the business my father started back in 1987. The work is hard, the hours are brutal during winter storms, and the pay is decent enough to support my family and keep 3 trucks running. I never expected that clearing a strip of private road would turn into the biggest legal mess of my life. "You need to stop immediately," Deborah shouted over the rumble of my diesel engine. She was standing in the middle of Mountain View Lane, bundled up in a designer parka that probably cost more than my monthly insurance payment. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the snow falling around us, and her expression radiated the kind of anger that only comes from someone who truly believes they are right about everything. I rolled down my window, letting in a blast of cold air. "Madam, I have a contract to plow this stretch. I have been doing it for 6 years now." "Not anymore, you do not," she said, thrusting the letter toward me. "The Cedar Ridge Premium Estates Homeowners Association has voted to terminate your services effective immediately. You are trespassing on private HOA property." I took the letter, scanning it quickly while my truck idled. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. The HOA claimed exclusive control over all roads within their boundaries and had decided to hire their own snow removal company. My route, which connected the main highway to the emergency services road and then looped through their development, was no longer available to me. "This does not make sense," I said, looking back at Deborah. "I have been plowing the emergency access road for the county. That is not HOA property." "Read Section 3, Paragraph 2, she said with the satisfaction of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "The emergency access road runs through HOA property for approximately 1 mile. We have an easement agreement with the county, and we control who uses that easement. You no longer have permission." I felt my jaw tighten. The emergency access road was critical infrastructure. It connected Cedar Ridge to the rural fire station, the ambulance depot, and served as the only route for emergency vehicles when the main highway got buried under heavy snow. That happened at least a dozen times every winter in this part of Montana. The road ran behind the HOA development, cutting through their property before connecting to the service facilities on the other side. "Who did you hire to replace me?" I asked. "Alpine Premium Services out of Billings," Deborah said proudly. "They are professional, certified, and they understand how to work with quality communities like ours." I knew Alpine. They were expensive, unreliable, and had a habit of taking on more contracts than they could handle. During the last big storm, they had left half of Billings unplowed for 3 days because their equipment broke down. But I also knew that arguing with Deborah Henderson in the middle of a snowstorm was not going to change anything. "Fine," I said, putting my truck in gear. "You will have your paperwork, but you are making a mistake." The only mistake was allowing unvetted contractors access to our premium community, she called after me as I drove away. That night, I sat in my office going through my contracts and maps. My route through Cedar Ridge had been carefully planned over the years. I started at the highway, cleared the emergency access road first because that was the most critical infrastructure, then made my way through the HOA development, and finished with the county roads on the far side. The whole loop took about 4 hours in normal snow, longer during heavy storms. Without access to the emergency road through the HOA property, my entire route fell apart. I could not reach the county roads on the other side efficiently, And more importantly, I could not fulfill my contract with the county to keep the emergency access road clear. My wife, Sarah, came into the office with 2 mugs of coffee. "You have been staring at those maps for 2 hours," she said. "The HOA just killed my primary route," I said. "If I cannot plow the emergency access road, I am going to lose the county contract. That is 40% of my winter revenue." Sarah sat down across from me, her expression serious. "Can they actually do that? Block access to an emergency road? They claim the road crosses their property, so they control the easement. Technically, they might be right, but morally, this is insane. That road is the only way emergency vehicles can reach the rural areas during heavy snow." "What are you going to do?" I took a long drink of coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. "I am going to call the county tomorrow and explain the situation. Then I am going to talk to a lawyer. This cannot be legal." The next morning, I drove to the county offices in Cedar Ridge. The building was a modest brick structure that housed everything from the clerk's office to the public works department. I found Bill Morrison in his usual spot, surrounded by maps and work orders. Bill had been the county road supervisor for 23 years. He was a practical man who understood how things worked in rural Montana. When I explained what the HOA had done, his face went red. "They cannot do that," he said flatly. "We have an emergency access easement through that property. It was established in 1992 when the development was first approved. Deborah Henderson seems to think they can control who uses the easement," I said. Bill pulled out a thick folder and started flipping through documents. "The easement agreement gives the county right-of-way for emergency access. It does not give the HOA authority to block contractors working for the county. So what do we do?" "I am going to call the county attorney," Bill said, reaching for his phone. "This is a public safety issue. If that road does not get plowed, people could die." I spent the next 2 hours in the county offices while Bill and the county attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Green, reviewed the easement agreement. The legal language was complex, but the conclusion was clear. The HOA had overstepped their authority. "They can control who plows their internal streets," Patricia explained, "but they cannot block access to the emergency road. The easement gives us perpetual access for emergency services and maintenance, which includes snow removal." "Can you send them a letter?" I asked. "I am going to do better than that," Patricia said. "I am going to file for an injunction. They need to understand that this is not negotiable." I left the county offices feeling slightly better, but I knew this fight was far from over. Deborah Henderson did not strike me as someone who backed down easily. That afternoon, I got a call from Tom Richards, the fire chief for Cedar Ridge Rural Fire District. His voice was tense. "Marcus, I just heard what happened with the HOA. Is it true you cannot plow the emergency access road anymore?" "That is what they are claiming," I said, "but the county attorney is working on it." "We need that road clear," Tom said. "You know as well as I do that we get cut off from the rural areas every time we get more than a foot of snow. That road is our lifeline. I know. I am doing everything I can." "The HOA hired Alpine Premium Services," Tom said. "I called them this morning to confirm they understood the priority of the emergency road. They told me they would get to it when they could. When they could, Marcus." "That is not good enough." I felt anger building in my chest. "Did they give you a timeline?" "They said they would prioritize the HOA streets first, then handle the emergency road within 24 hours of a storm." 24 hours. Someone could die waiting that long. "That is exactly what I told them," Tom said. "Look, I do not want to put pressure on you, but we need a solution here. The county needs to sort this out fast." The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and legal paperwork. Patricia Green filed for an emergency injunction against the HOA, arguing that their restriction on the emergency access road created a clear and present danger to public safety. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Meanwhile, the weather forecasts were predicting a major storm system moving into Montana that weekend. The National Weather Service was calling for 18 to 24 inches of snow in the mountains, with high winds and whiteout conditions. It would be the first significant storm of the season. On Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Deborah Henderson. "Mr. Sullivan, I understand you are taking legal action against the Homeowners Association," she said, her voice icy. "The county is taking legal action," I corrected. "I am just trying to do my job. Your job does not include harassing a legitimate homeowners association that is simply trying to maintain quality standards in our community." Quality standards. I could not keep the frustration out of my voice. We are talking about an emergency access road. This is not about quality. This is about safety. The HOA has hired qualified professionals to handle snow removal, Deborah said. Alpine Premium Services is perfectly capable of maintaining the emergency road. Have you checked their track record? They are unreliable at best. That is your opinion. The HOA board has full confidence in our decision. I am calling to inform you that if you set foot on any HOA property, including the emergency access road that runs through our easement, we will have you arrested for trespassing. You cannot do that. The county has legal authority over that road. We will see what the judge says on Monday, Deborah said, and hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. The HOA was actually threatening to have me arrested for plowing an emergency access road. The absurdity of it would have been funny if the situation was not so serious. The storm arrived Friday night, earlier than predicted and heavier than the forecast suggested. By Saturday morning, we had already received 14 inches of snow, and it was still coming down hard. The wind was gusting up to 40 miles per hour, creating massive drifts across every road in the county. I was out at 3 in the morning, working my modified route. Without access through the HOA property, I had to take a circuitous path that added 90 minutes to my normal time. I plowed the main highway, cleared the county roads I could reach, and then headed toward the emergency services area from the north side. The problem became apparent immediately. The northern approach to the fire station and ambulance depot was steep and winding, cutting through dense forest. In good conditions, it was manageable. In a blizzard with 2 feet of snow, it was nearly impossible. My truck struggled on the grades, the plow catching on hidden obstacles buried under the drifts. By the time I reached the fire station, I had been working for 7 hours straight and had only completed half my normal route. Tom Richards was standing outside, watching me with a grim expression. The southern route through the HOA property would have taken you, 20 minutes? He called out as I climbed down from my truck. "About that," I said, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Alpine called an hour ago. They said they cannot make it out here until tomorrow at the earliest. Their equipment is all working the Billings area." "Fantastic," I muttered. "Marcus, we got a call 30 minutes ago. Medical emergency up on Ridge Line Road. That is 15 miles past the HOA development, and there is no way to reach it except through the emergency access road." My stomach dropped. "Can the ambulance get through?" "Not a chance. The access road is completely blocked. We cannot even get a 4-wheel drive vehicle through that much snow." As if on cue, Tom's radio crackled. I could hear the dispatcher's voice, urgent and stressed. "Chief, we have another emergency call. Chest pains at 4847 Mountain Creek Road. Patient is 72 years old. Tom grabbed his radio. Dispatch, what is the road condition on Mountain Creek? Impassable. Snow depth is over 3 feet in the drifts. No access from any direction except the southern emergency road. Tom looked at me, and I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Do what you need to do, he said quietly. I did not need to be told twice. I climbed back into my truck, fired up the engine, and headed south. The emergency access road ran directly through the back section of the Cedar Ridge Premium Estates property. The HOA had built an ornate fence along their property line with signs every 100 feet proclaiming, "Private property, no trespassing, Cedar Ridge Premium Estates, HOA." I crashed through a snowdrift and onto the emergency road, my plow blade throwing up waves of white on either side. The road was completely buried, exactly as I had feared. Alpine had not touched it. I worked methodically, clearing a path wide enough for emergency vehicles, my truck strobe lights flashing in the darkness. It took me 45 minutes to clear the entire mile-long stretch that crossed HOA property. Behind me, I could see the flashing lights of the ambulance following the path I had created. They raced past, heading toward the medical emergency, and I felt a grim satisfaction. Whatever legal trouble I was about to face, I had made the right choice. I continued plowing, opening up access to the rural areas beyond the HOA development. As dawn broke, I had cleared enough road for emergency vehicles to reach any location in their service area. My truck was running on fumes and I was exhausted, but the job was done. I was heading back toward town when I saw the blue and red lights in my rearview mirror. A Cedar Ridge police cruiser was pulling me over. Officer Mike Brennan approached my window with a cautious expression. I had known Mike for 10 years. We had coached kids' baseball together. "Marcus, I got a complaint from the HOA," he said, sounding apologetic. "They are saying you trespassed on their property." "I plowed the emergency access road," I said. "There were medical emergencies. People needed help." "I know. I heard the dispatch calls. But I have to follow up on the complaint. Deborah Henderson is insisting I arrest you for plowing a road so an ambulance could save someone's life." Mike shook his head. "I am not going to arrest you, but I do need to write up a report. Just give me your statement." I explained everything while Mike took notes. He seemed increasingly frustrated as I talked. "This is ridiculous," he finally said. "The HOA is going to push this, though. You should probably talk to a lawyer before Monday's hearing." By the time I got home Saturday afternoon, I was running on pure adrenaline. Sarah took one look at me and pointed to the bedroom. "Sleep," she said. "I will handle the phone." I slept for 6 hours, then woke up to find a dozen messages waiting. 3 were from Tom Richards thanking me for opening the emergency road. 2 were from county officials expressing support. 1 was from Patricia Green, the county attorney, asking me to call her immediately. I called Patricia from my office. "Marcus, I heard what happened this morning," she said. "First, thank you. You did the right thing. Second, we need to accelerate our legal strategy." "What do you mean?" "The HOA has filed for an emergency restraining order against you personally. They are asking the judge to prohibit you from entering their property under any circumstances, with criminal penalties for violation. They are also threatening to sue you for damages." "Damages? I cleared a public emergency road during a medical crisis." "I know. And that is exactly the argument we are going to make. But Deborah Henderson has hired a law firm out of Missoula. They are playing hardball." "What do I need to do?" "Be at the courthouse Monday morning at 9. Dress professionally, bring all your documentation, and be prepared to testify. This is going to be a complicated hearing." Sunday was quieter but tense. The storm had moved through, leaving Cedar Ridge under nearly 2 feet of snow. I spent the day maintaining my equipment and reviewing my records. Every contract, every invoice, every communication with the county was organized in a thick folder. That afternoon, I drove past the Cedar Ridge Premium Estates development. Alpine had finally shown up and was working on the HOA streets. I noticed they had not touched the emergency access road again. The path I had cleared was already drifting shut in places. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed in the only suit I owned, a navy blue thing I usually reserved for weddings and funerals. Sarah adjusted my tie and gave me an encouraging smile. "You did the right thing," she said. "Remember that. The courthouse in Cedar Ridge was an old stone building that served 3 counties. The hearing room was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and a single judge's bench at the front. Patricia Green was already there, setting up her materials. Across the aisle, I saw Deborah Henderson sitting with 2 lawyers in expensive suits. Judge Margaret Foster entered at 9 exactly. She was in her early 60s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. "We are here for case number 2020 for CV 1847, Cedar Ridge Premium Estates Homeowners Association versus Marcus Sullivan, and the related county action regarding emergency access easements," she said. "Let us proceed." The HOA's lead attorney, a man named Richard Pemberton, went first. He was smooth and articulate, painting a picture of an HOA simply trying to maintain professional standards in their community. According to him, I was a rogue contractor who had violated their clearly stated directives and trespassed on private property. "Your Honor, the HOA has exclusive control over their property boundaries and the easements that cross their land," Pemberton argued. Mr. Sullivan was explicitly informed that his services were no longer required, and he was forbidden from entering HOA property. Yet he deliberately violated those instructions, causing damage to HOA infrastructure and creating liability concerns. "What damage?" Judge Foster asked. "The aggressive plowing damaged landscaping along the emergency access road and broke several HOA signs," Pemberton said. "During a blizzard." The judge asked skeptically, "That does not excuse trespassing, Your Honor." Patricia Green stood up for her turn. She presented the county's easement agreement, showing that the emergency access road was critical public infrastructure that the county had the right to maintain. "Your Honor, this is not about HOA preferences or contractor selection," Patricia said. "This is about public safety. The easement agreement is clear. The county has perpetual access rights for emergency services and road maintenance. The HOA cannot restrict that access, and they certainly cannot prevent the county's contractors from performing essential services." "Mr. Sullivan does not work directly for the county," Pemberton interjected. "He is an independent contractor, working under a county contract to maintain emergency access," Patricia countered. "The distinction is irrelevant. The work is authorized by the county under the easement agreement." Judge Foster turned her attention to me. "Mr. Sullivan, please explain what happened Saturday morning." I stood up, suddenly aware of how many people were watching. I saw Tom Richards sitting in the back row, along with several other emergency services personnel. I laid out the sequence of events, keeping my voice steady and factual. The storm, the emergency calls, the realization that the ambulance could not reach patients without the access road being cleared, and my decision to plow through the HOA property to open that critical route. "Were you aware of the HOA's directive forbidding you from entering their property?" Judge Foster asked. "Yes, Your Honor, but I was also aware that people were having medical emergencies and could not get help without that road being cleared. Did you consider the legal consequences? I did. But I decided that saving lives was more important than worrying about trespassing charges. Pemberton jumped back in. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of vigilante attitude that justifies the HOA's concerns. Mr. Sullivan admits he deliberately violated clear legal directives. To save lives, Patricia said sharply. During an actual emergency when the HOA's chosen contractor had abandoned their responsibilities, Judge Foster held up a hand. I want to hear from the HOA directly. Miss Henderson, please take the stand. Deborah Henderson walked to the witness stand with confidence. She was wearing a sharp business suit and looked like she had prepared extensively for this moment. Pemberton questioned her first, letting her explain the HOA's position. According to Deborah, the association was simply exercising its legal rights to control access to their property and maintain quality standards. She claimed that Alpine Premium Services had assured them they could handle all snow removal needs, including the emergency access road. When did Alpine tell you they would clear the emergency road? Patricia asked during cross-examination. They said it would be a priority, Deborah said. That is not what I asked. When specifically did they say they would clear it? Deborah hesitated. Within a reasonable time frame. Did you know there were medical emergencies that required immediate access? I was not aware of specific emergencies, no. If you had known that someone was having a heart attack and could not receive medical care because the road was blocked, would you have insisted that Alpine clear it immediately? Of course, but that is a hypothetical situation. Patricia pulled out a document. This is the dispatch log from Saturday morning. It shows 2 medical emergencies requiring ambulance response to areas only accessible via the emergency access road. Both calls came in before Mr. Sullivan began plowing. Were you or anyone from the HOA board monitoring these emergency calls? That is not our responsibility. But blocking the road that emergency services need is within your authority. We did not block anything. We simply restricted access to our property, thereby preventing the emergency road from being cleared during an active medical crisis. Pemberton objected, but Judge Foster was already making notes. The hearing continued for another 2 hours. Tom Richards testified about the critical nature of the emergency access road and the inadequacy of alternative routes. Bill Morrison from the county presented documentation showing that Alpine had been contacted multiple times about clearing the road and had failed to respond. A representative from Alpine, brought in by subpoena, admitted they had been overwhelmed by the storm and had prioritized their larger contracts in Billings. Finally, Judge Foster called for a recess. I need to review these materials. We will reconvene in 1 hour. I spent that hour in a small conference room with Patricia, drinking bad coffee and trying not to think about the possible outcomes. If the judge ruled in favor of the HOA, I could face criminal trespassing charges and potentially lose my business. If she ruled for the county, the HOA might appeal and drag this out for months. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Foster had a thick document in front of her and an expression that gave nothing away. I have reviewed the easement agreement, the relevant statutes, and the testimony presented today, she began. This case presents a conflict between property rights and public safety, and I do not take that lightly. She looked directly at Deborah Henderson. The HOA has legitimate authority over their property and the right to select contractors who work within their boundaries. However, that authority is not unlimited. The easement agreement clearly grants the county perpetual access, rights for emergency services, and related maintenance. The HOA cannot restrict that access without county approval. Pemberton started to stand, but Judge Foster continued. More importantly, the HOA's actions created a clear and present danger to public health and safety. By forbidding Mr. Sullivan from clearing the emergency access road, and then failing to ensure their chosen contractor provided adequate service, the HOA placed residents of this county at risk. That is unacceptable. She turned to me. Mr. Sullivan, while I understand your motivations, you did technically violate the HOA's directive. However, your actions were taken during an emergency situation where lives were at stake. Under Montana's necessity doctrine, your actions were legally justified. I felt tension draining from my shoulders. I am issuing the following orders, Judge Foster said. First, the county's emergency access easement includes the right to conduct necessary maintenance, including snow removal, without HOA interference. Mr. Sullivan, working under county contract, has the legal right to clear that road as needed. Second, the HOA is prohibited from restricting emergency access or interfering with emergency services in any way. Third, the HOA's request for a restraining order is denied. Fourth, I am ordering the HOA to pay court costs. Pemberton was on his feet. Your Honor, we request the opportunity to appeal. You have that right, Judge Foster said, but I am also issuing an immediate injunction. The HOA will not restrict access to the emergency road pending any appeal. This is a public safety issue, and I will not allow it to be delayed by legal maneuvering. She banged her gavel, and it was over. Outside the courthouse, Patricia shook my hand with a satisfied smile. That went better than I expected. Judge Foster does not mess around with public safety issues. What happens now? I asked. The HOA can appeal, but it will take months, and the injunction stays in place. You can go back to your normal plowing route. I would also suggest you document everything meticulously, just in case they try something else. Tom Richards caught up with me in the parking lot. Marcus, thank you. If you had not cleared that road Saturday, we would have lost someone. The man with chest pains was in serious trouble. The paramedics said another 30 minutes and he would not have made it. That made everything worthwhile. The legal stress, the confrontation, the uncertainty, all of it faded when I thought about that 72-year-old man who was alive because I had made the right choice. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The following weekend brought another major storm, this one even worse than the first. The National Weather Service issued a blizzard warning for the entire region, predicting up to 30 inches of snow and sustained winds over 50 miles per hour. It was the kind of storm that shut down everything. I was out plowing by 2 in the morning on Saturday, working my full route now that the legal restrictions were lifted. The emergency access road was my first priority, just as it had always been. I cleared the entire mile-long section through the HOA property, then continued to the emergency services area and the rural roads beyond. At 6 in the morning, as I was making my second pass through the HOA section, I noticed something odd. There were lights on in several houses along the emergency access road, and people were standing outside watching me work. That was unusual. Most people stayed inside during blizzards. Then I saw why they were watching. A massive tree had fallen across Mountain View Lane, the main entrance to the Cedar Ridge Premium Estates development. The tree was easily 4 feet in diameter, and it had taken down power lines with it. The entire entrance was blocked. I stopped my truck and got out to assess the situation. A man in his 50s approached me, bundled up against the wind. "Are you Marcus Sullivan?" he asked. "That is me." "Thank God. The main entrance is completely blocked. That tree came down around 4 this morning. We cannot get in or out, and the power is out for half the development. Have you called the power company? They said it would be hours before they could get a crew out here. Same with tree removal. Everyone is overwhelmed by the storm. I looked at the situation more carefully. The fallen tree was not just blocking the entrance. It was also blocking the only way in or out of the development from the main highway. The roads on the other sides of the HOA property were private driveways that did not connect to public roads, except for the emergency access road. The irony was not lost on me. The HOA had fought tooth and nail to keep me off their property, and now the emergency access road through their development was the only way residents could get in or out. The emergency road connects to the county highway system on the other side, I said. If you need to go anywhere, that is your only option until the main entrance gets cleared. But that road is not maintained for regular traffic, the man said. It is just a gravel emergency route. It is plowed and passable right now, I said. I just cleared it an hour ago. More residents were gathering now, drawn by the unusual sight of people standing outside during a blizzard. I recognized several faces, though I did not know names. They all lived in the premium development that had worked so hard to exclude me. A woman in an expensive parka pushed to the front of the group. I need to get to Billings for a medical appointment this morning. It is extremely important. The emergency road will get you to the county highway, I said. From there, you can reach Billings, assuming the main roads are passable. But that road goes right through the middle of our property. It was never meant for regular use. Right now, it is your only option, I said simply. Deborah Henderson's silver SUV came sliding up the street, chains clanking on her tires. She got out, took one look at the blocked entrance, and then spotted me. Her expression went through several emotions in rapid succession: recognition, anger, and then something that might have been resignation. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her tone significantly less hostile than our previous encounters. "I assume you have heard about our situation." "Just now," I said. "Looks like you are going to need to use the emergency access road until the main entrance gets cleared." I could see her jaw working as she processed the situation. "How long until that road is passable?" "It is passable right now. I have been maintaining it all morning." "I mean, how long until it is suitable for regular residential traffic?" "It is a county emergency road," I said. "It meets county standards for emergency vehicle access. That means it is plowed, graded, and safe for any vehicle that can handle gravel surfaces. But it is not going to be as smooth as your paved HOA streets." Another resident, a younger man I did not recognize, spoke up. "Can the HOA even allow us to use that road? I thought it was restricted to emergency vehicles only." "The easement allows for emergency access," I said. "I would say being trapped in your development during a blizzard qualifies as an emergency situation. But you should probably check with the county to be sure." Deborah pulled out her phone, stepped away, and made a call. I could not hear the conversation, but I could tell it was not going the way she wanted. When she came back, her expression was carefully neutral. "The county says we can use the emergency road for ingress and egress while the main entrance is blocked," she said. "They are treating it as an emergency situation." "Glad to hear it," I said. "How much is this going to cost?" Deborah asked. "What do you mean?" "Keeping the emergency road clear so our residents can use it. What are you going to charge?" I had not even thought about that angle. "I am already maintaining it under my county contract. There is no additional charge." Deborah looked suspicious, as if I were setting a trap. "You are going to plow our only access point out of the goodness of your heart." "I am going to plow the emergency access road because that is my job," I said. The fact that it is currently your only access point is not my problem or my business opportunity. I am just doing what I have been doing for 6 years. I climbed back into my truck, leaving them standing there in the snow. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Deborah's face in my rearview mirror. She looked like someone who had just realized they had made a serious miscalculation. The storm continued through the weekend. The tree blocking the main entrance proved difficult to remove because of the downed power lines. The utility company had to secure the electrical hazard before tree removal crews could safely work. That process took until Monday afternoon. For those 3 days, the emergency access road was the only route in and out of Cedar Ridge Premium Estates. I maintained my normal plowing schedule, keeping the road clear every 6 hours during active snowfall. Dozens of HOA residents use the road to get to work, make medical appointments, or simply escape their homes for essential errands. I did not make a big deal about it. I just did the work. On Tuesday morning, I got a call from Patricia Green. "Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up," she said. "The HOA's law firm called my office yesterday. They are dropping their appeal." "Really?" Apparently, the board had an emergency meeting after the weekend. They realized that fighting over the emergency access road was not in their best interest, especially after it saved them during the tree incident. "That is good news, I guess." "There is more," Patricia said. "Deborah Henderson is no longer the HOA president." The board voted her out in a special session Monday night. That surprised me. Why? From what I heard, a lot of residents were angry about the whole situation. The costs of hiring the expensive law firm, the bad press, and then the embarrassment of depending on the road they tried to close. Several board members called for her resignation, and when she refused, they held a vote of no confidence. "Who is the new president?" A man named Robert Chen. "He is a retired engineer, apparently a lot more practical than Henderson. He has already reached out to the county to establish better communication about shared infrastructure." I felt a weight lifting that I had not realized I was carrying. The legal fight was over. The HOA was backing down. Things could go back to normal. "Thanks for letting me know," I said. "Thank you for handling this with professionalism," Patricia said. "A lot of contractors would have walked away and let the HOA deal with the consequences. You put public safety first, and that matters." The rest of the winter was busy but uneventful. I maintained my full route, including the emergency access road through the HOA property. I saw Deborah Henderson occasionally, usually in her SUV heading out for shopping or appointments. She never waved or acknowledged me. That was fine. I did not need her approval to do my job. Robert Chen, the new HOA president, turned out to be a reasonable person. He called me in February to discuss the possibility of Sullivan Snow Services taking over the HOA's internal street plowing. Alpine Premium Services had proven to be as unreliable as I had predicted, and the residents were tired of waiting days for their streets to be cleared. I met with Robert and 2 other board members at a coffee shop in downtown Cedar Ridge. They were apologetic about the whole situation and straightforward about what they needed. "We made a mistake," Robert said simply. "Henderson was so focused on image and prestige that she lost sight of practical concerns. We need reliable snow removal, and you have a proven track record." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I want to make sure we are clear on expectations. I prioritize emergency access and county roads first. That is non-negotiable. HOA streets come after those responsibilities are met." "We understand," Robert said. "Honestly, that is how it should be." We were wrong to try to change that priority. We worked out a contract that was fair to both sides. The HOA would pay slightly more than they had been paying Alpine, but they would get reliable service with clear communication about timing and priorities. I agreed to provide regular updates during major storms and to coordinate with the county on emergency access issues. The contract was approved by the full HOA board without a single objection. Spring arrived in Montana with the usual dramatic shift. The snow melted, revealing a winter's worth of debris and damage. I spent March and April on equipment maintenance preparing for the next season. It was quiet, productive work, and I was grateful for the calm after the chaos of winter. In May, I got an unexpected visit at my shop. Tom Richards pulled up in his fire department SUV, accompanied by a woman I did not recognize. "Marcus, got a minute?" Tom asked. "Sure, what is up?" The woman stepped forward and offered her hand. "Mr. Sullivan, my name is Ellen Mitchell. I am a reporter with Montana Mountain News. I am doing a story about rural emergency services and infrastructure challenges. Chief Richards told me about your situation with the HOA last winter. I was hoping you might be willing to talk about it." I glanced at Tom, who shrugged. "It is a good story, Marcus. And it highlights important issues about how HOAs and counties need to work together on public safety." I invited them into my office and spent an hour talking through everything that had happened. Ellen was thorough and professional, asking detailed questions about the legal battle, the emergency situations, and the eventual resolution. "What would you say is the main lesson from all this?" she asked. I thought about that for a moment. Public safety should always come first. Property rights and community standards are important, but they cannot override the basic need to keep people safe. The HOA lost sight of that, and it took a crisis to remind them. "Do you think HOAs in general have too much power?" "I think HOAs serve a purpose," I said carefully. "But they need oversight and accountability, especially when their decisions affect public infrastructure. In this case, the legal system worked. The judge made the right call, and the county stood up for public safety. But it should not have required a lawsuit to reach that obvious conclusion." The article came out in June, right as I was starting to book contracts for the next winter season. Ellen had done a good job telling the story accurately and fairly. She interviewed Deborah Henderson, who defended her actions as a good faith attempt to maintain community standards. She also interviewed Robert Chen, who acknowledged the HOA's mistakes and talked about the reforms they had implemented. The article got picked up by several other regional publications and even made it to some national news websites. For a few weeks, I fielded calls from other snow removal contractors who had dealt with similar HOA conflicts. It seemed like my experience was not unique. One call stood out. It came from a state legislator named Jennifer Morrison, who represented a district that included several mountain communities with HOA developments. "Mr. Sullivan, your story has highlighted a gap in our state laws," she said. "HOAs have significant authority over private property, but there are insufficient protections for critical infrastructure that crosses or depends on that property. I am working on legislation to address this, and I would like your input." I spent several hours over the next few months working with Jennifer and her staff on draft legislation. The bill, which was introduced in the next legislative session, required HOAs to coordinate with county authorities on any decisions affecting emergency access routes or public safety infrastructure. It also established clear penalties for HOAs that interfered with emergency services. The bill passed with bipartisan support and was signed into law by the governor. I got a copy of the signed legislation framed and hung it in my office. It felt good to know that something positive had come from the whole mess. By the time the next winter season rolled around, everything had settled into a comfortable routine. I had my full route back, plus the additional HOA contract. The relationship with Cedar Ridge Premium Estates was professional and cooperative. Robert Chen proved to be an excellent HOA president, focusing on practical concerns rather than prestige. I saw Deborah Henderson around town occasionally. She had moved into a lower profile, serving on a few volunteer committees, but staying away from HOA leadership. At a community fundraiser in December, she actually approached me. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her tone neutral. "I wanted to apologize for how I handled things last winter. I was wrong to prioritize community image over practical safety concerns. I let my ego get in the way of good judgment." I was surprised by the directness of her apology. "I appreciate you saying that. For what it is worth, I have learned from the experience," she said. "Sometimes the people who seem like obstacles are actually the ones who keep everything running. I should have recognized that sooner." "We all make mistakes," I said. "What matters is learning from them." She nodded and moved on to talk to other people at the fundraiser. It was not a grand reconciliation or a dramatic moment of forgiveness. It was just two people acknowledging that a conflict had ended and life had moved on. That winter was one of the smoothest I had experienced in years. The snow came regularly but not catastrophically. My equipment ran well. The contracts were profitable. The emergency access road stayed clear, and no medical emergencies required heroic interventions. It was almost boring compared to the previous year, and I could not have been happier about it. One evening in March, as the last snows of the season were falling, Sarah and I sat on our porch watching the sunset. The mountains were turning purple in the fading light, and the air had that particular quality that signaled winter's end. "You ever think about what would have happened if the judge had ruled differently?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "We could have lost everything. The business, the contracts, maybe even faced criminal charges. But you would still have done it, would you not? Plowed that road, I mean." "Yeah, I would have. Some things are more important than protecting yourself." Sarah smiled and squeezed my hand. "That is why I married you. Even when you are being stubborn and reckless, you are doing it for the right reasons." "I prefer to think of it as principled and brave," I said. "Of course you do." We sat in comfortable silence watching the snow fall. Somewhere in the darkness, an emergency vehicle's siren briefly wailed, probably responding to a minor accident on one of the mountain roads. The sound reminded me why the work mattered. Infrastructure was not glamorous. Snow plowing was cold, exhausting, and mostly thankless. But it was essential. When spring finally arrived in full force, I started thinking about the next winter. Equipment to upgrade, routes to optimize, contracts to renew. It was the natural rhythm of the business, and I found comfort in the routine. The Cedar Ridge Premium Estates, HOA, sent their contract renewal in April, with a personal note from Robert Chen thanking me for reliable service. They even included a small bonus, which was unexpected and appreciated. Tom Richards stopped by the shop in May with news that the county was expanding emergency services to cover additional rural areas. They wanted to extend the emergency access road network and needed contractors who understood the critical nature of the work. Was I interested? Of course I was. By summer, I was mapping new routes and pricing equipment upgrades. The expansion would require a fourth truck and possibly hiring an additional driver. It was growth, opportunity, and validation that the work I did mattered. One afternoon in July, I was in my office when a young man knocked on the door. He was maybe 25, wearing work boots and a flannel shirt, looking nervous. "Are you Marcus Sullivan?" he asked. "That is me. What can I do for you? My name is Danny Price. I am a snow removal contractor over in Whitefish. I read about what happened with your HOA situation last year. I am dealing with something similar right now, and I was hoping you might have some advice. I invited Danny in and spent the next 2 hours talking through his situation. His HOA was trying to restrict his access to a shared maintenance road that served multiple developments. It was not quite the same as my situation, but there were parallels. I gave him Patricia Green's contact information and walked him through the legal strategies that had worked for me. I also gave him the most important piece of advice I had learned. Do not let them bully you into compromising public safety, I said. HOAs have legitimate authority, but that authority has limits. When they cross the line into affecting critical infrastructure or emergency services, push back. Get the county involved, document everything, and do not back down on principle. Danny left looking more confident, and I felt good about helping someone avoid the mistakes I had made. As the seasons cycled and years passed, the incident with the Cedar Ridge Premium Estates HOA became a story I told occasionally, usually to other contractors facing similar challenges. The details faded slightly, but the core lessons remained sharp. Always put safety first. Stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. Infrastructure matters. Community means looking beyond property lines to the systems that keep everyone safe and connected. The emergency access road still runs through the HOA property, just as it did before all the drama. I plow it regularly, maintaining the same standards I always have. Sometimes I see residents using the road, and occasionally someone will wave or flash their lights in acknowledgement. It is just a road. Gravel and dirt, plowed clear of snow when needed, serving its purpose without fanfare. But it represents something more important, the recognition that we are all connected, whether we like it or not. The choices we make about shared resources and infrastructure affect everyone. Deborah Henderson learned that lesson the hard way. The HOA learned it when their main entrance was blocked, and they needed the road they had tried to restrict. I learned it when I chose to plow through legal threats because lives were at stake. The best outcome of the whole situation was not the legal victory or the new legislation or even the expanded contracts. It was the simple fact that the system worked. Public safety was protected. The courts made the right decision. The community ultimately chose practical solutions over prestige. That is not always how these stories end, and I am grateful it worked out the way it did. As I write this, looking out at the mountains that have been my home for my entire life, I think about the responsibility that comes with doing essential work. Whether it is plowing snow, fighting fires, providing medical care, or maintaining infrastructure, these jobs are the foundation that everything else rests on. They are not glamorous. They do not get attention until something goes wrong, but they matter more than most people realize. The emergency access road through Cedar Ridge Premium Estates is just one small piece of a massive, interconnected system that keeps rural Montana functioning through brutal winters. But it taught me that even small pieces matter, and protecting them is worth fighting for. The next winter season will come as it always does. The snow will fall, the roads will need plowing, and I will be out there in my truck at 3 in the morning, clearing paths so people can live their lives safely. It is what I do. It is what I will keep doing. And if another HOA somewhere decides to make the same mistake that Deborah Henderson made, I hope they remember this story. I hope they think twice before interfering with critical infrastructure. And I hope they understand that the unglamorous work of maintenance and emergency services is not something to be dismissed or controlled by committee votes. Some things are bigger than property values and community standards. Some things matter more than image and prestige. Public safety is one of those things, and I will always put it first, regardless of the consequences. That is not heroism. That is just doing the job right.